Yeah, streaming will be on in a few seconds.
If you want to make me presenter, Andrew, I'll put the opening slide on.
Which are you down as Bedford host 1?
Yes, I am.
Hang on, I'm just admitting somebody. Bedford host 1. Change role, make presenter. Okay, you're a presenter.
So can I ask Committee Services Office if you confirm that we are now live?
We are live.
We are.
Okay, so members of the public, this meeting set out is a virtual meeting in accordance with Regulation 5 of the Local Authorities, Police and Crime Panels, Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority and Police and Crime Panel Meetings, Regulations 2020. These regulations allow for remote attendance, either online or by telephone. Please note that any member of the press or public may listen to these proceedings, as this is a virtual meeting via a web link. A link to the meeting has been published at least 24 hours before this meeting. It's important that members of the panel can discuss and take decisions without interruption, so only the participants of this virtual meeting will be members of the panel. The Commissioner, her staff and officers supporting the meeting. If you wish to raise a question at this meeting, you need to have done so in writing at least 4 days prior to the date at the beginning of the meeting. Okay, so hopefully that's understood. Can I ask for a little bit of housekeeping to start? So ask for all members to mute your mics, please, and to use the raise your hand function if you wish to speak in this meeting. And I will use the grid system. So hopefully, if I miss your raised hand, if you could wave copiously towards me, and then I will attempt to make sure that you get the opportunity to speak. Could I ask Councillor Graham and Councillor Salim if you could both switch your cameras on so that I can see you in the event that you are waving in your hands? It'd be quite useful.
My camera's playing up.
Okay, so you'll have to shout then. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So we move on then to the first item on the agenda, which is the election and appointment of a vice chair for this committee. Members, can I have nominations for a vice chair? Okay, so no nomination for on the floor. So I'm going to nominate from the chair, Mr. Paul Downing. Paul's had an exemplary career in the police and has experience with the panel.
I'll second that nomination, Chair.
So I can see another hands up. Mohammed Councillor Nawaz had his hand up first.
Second that. So
I'll take that. Members, are all members, as we only have any further nominations? Let's go for that first. Nominations? No? Okay. So there being no further nominations, Mr. Paul Downing, independent member, is nominated to position of vice chair of the Police and Crime Panel. So thank you.
Thank you, members.
Members to mute your microphones, please. So members, the next item, I'm going to use Chairman's prerogative and bring an extra item onto the agenda, which should have come on, and my apologies that it was missed off, and that is the appointment of members to the Complaints Subcommittee. We haven't appointed members to this since early 2019. The previous members were Mr. Kane, who is no longer a member of the panel, Mr. Warburton, myself, Councillor Ali, and Councillor Nawaz. So I'm satisfied that we used 5 or 6 different members. So can I have nominations to the complaints panel, please? You can self-nominate on this.
I'm happy, Chair.
Okay, so it's Mr. Downing. Councillor Graham. I'm going to put myself down if members are happy with that. Okay, looking for a few more. Councillor Nawaz. Okay. Mr. Melville. Are there any other nominations? There are a number of people with cameras I can't see on here. So if I haven't called your name out and you wish to be on there, could you shout? No?
So, Chair, I've registered that as Councillors Downing, Graham, Dalgarno, Nawaz, and independent member Mr. Melville.
Okay. Is Mr. Warburton on the call?
He's not.
He did speak to me today to say he wanted to be part of this. I'm just concerned that he's not managed to make his way into the meeting.
He's in the attendees. Andrew, can you?
Can we move Mr. Warburton into the actual substantive meeting?
Jeremy, I don't know if you've still got that power, because I can't seem to get anything to work at the moment.
I haven't.
Oh, it's just worked.
Okay. I thought we were missing somebody.
He may have missed that discussion.
Okay, so I'm going to redo this. I know Mr. Warburton contacted me. We had a conversation this afternoon. Okay, so it's nominations for the complaints subcommittee. Can I have self-nominations? The only one I'm missing.
Are we doing this again? In which case, I'm nominating myself.
I've got this already. I just, knowing that Mr. Warburton spoke to me this afternoon and wanted to be part of this, it would be useful if Damien, I can see you're now on the system.
I'm here. Can you hear me, Ian?
Hello, it's Ian.
Ian, it's Damien. I don't know why I have a technical ability here. I can see you and I can hear you, but you seem not to be able to hear me.
We can hear you, Damien. We can't see you.
Yeah, we can.
Right. Oh. Yes, that's still the case. Yes, I'll try and fix my problem at my end, but yes, thank you. I'll hang up.
Chair, you're on mute.
So members, we have 6 members of the panel to go forward with, okay? So then moving on to item, let's see what's next. Questions from members of the constituent councils and members of the public. And this is questions to the panel, not to PCC's office. So members, any questions? We haven't any external questions that have come into the panel. I'm aware of that. No, okay. So we'll now move on then to item 3, which is apologies. So Jeremy, have we received apologies from any members?
Yes, the only apologies we've received have been from Councillor Donnellan of Luton.
Okay. Claire, Kelly, do you want to make apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have one from the Commissioner, Catherine Holloway. Thank you. I'm representing. Okay,
thank you. It's noted. Members, we now move on to item 4, which is the minutes of 2 meetings. The first was held on the 13th of October, and these are to note. And the second one was on the 17th of November, which was the panel's review of the application for a new finance officer or head of finance for the Commissioner's office. Members happy that we accept and note the minutes of those meetings? And a double, yeah, okay, that's clear show of hands. Thank you, everybody.
And so just to clarify, they're both for being agreed to be approved.
To be approved. The members happy that we approve those minutes?
I had a point I wanted to raise. I'm not listed as being present on the 17th of November. I was there.
And Snap, Amanda, I took one of your questions, so I was there too. Yeah.
Okay. Members, can we amend, subject to the amendment to the minutes, are members happy that we adopt and accept those minutes? Yes. Okay, thank you. So we now move on then to item 7. Okay. So item 7, members, is sorry, item 5. Apologies, I'm reading my notes wrong here this evening. Okay, so item 5 is disclosure of pecuniary interests or disclosure of interest. Any member any interest in this item or items on the agenda this evening that they need to disclose? I would remind members, if we get to an item and you realise that, hang on, I should have disclosed something, you can do so at that point as well. Okay. All right, so members happy with that? So then move on then to item 6, which is the Commissioner's report. So I think at this point it's over to Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, panel members. Chair, if it's okay, I've got a few key updates from the report I'll just cover, and then very happy to go to questions if you're okay with that.
Yep.
Do excuse me looking that way. I've got 2 screens and that's my largest screen, so I apologise not looking directly into the camera. So a few updates first of all. I think it was about 3 police and crime panels ago when a member raised concern around the car park at HQ and the safety of it. I finally do have some good news. So the rear car park has now been completed and is open and is a much smoother surface and available for all response vehicles and police staff to be using as well. So that one is fixed. An update on that action from 3 or maybe 4 meetings ago. The bid process for the remaining funds for the year 21-22 have come to conclusion. The bid closed on Friday a week ago, and we've been processing those bids ever since then. I had confirmation from the PCC today on our research and on the proposals that we have for her. They are all confirmed. So we are on track to let all bidders know by the 18th of December whether they've been successful or whether we need to make any alterations. And I wanted to share this because this is the earliest we've gone. And I actually think it's a really good thing to do because it gives a good solid 3 months lead-in times for charities, community interest companies to be setting up those projects or those roles so that on the 1st of April, when they get that fund from the OPCC, they can be spending from day one, and we should have less issues for people needing to spend that money within 12 months only. Last week, we also saw our annual partnership event. We had 60 members attend from partnerships all across Bedfordshire. We've received great feedback that partners found it incredibly useful that we still went ahead. We did do that virtually. It was not a physical event. It had advantages and disadvantages, but the main thing that was so pleasing to hear was the way that all our partners have been coping during this incredibly difficult year. And I did just want to take the opportunity, Chair, to thank everyone that participated in this. I know the panel will always encourage us to do that partnership element, and we saw it in great detail last week. So my thanks to all involved. We were successful in another pot of money since the last police and crime panel. So we have another 140,000 coming in for both domestic abuse and sexual abuse services. That needs to go to charities and community organisations. That money's been allocated, and we worked with partners and the local authority to establish those pockets of money. So that has been spent. We also commenced the £25,000 bid for Safer Streets. This was the Pockets of Community initiative that's linked within those 2 areas. So that has been completed, and everyone who was successful has been informed. We had the 1-year anniversary of Direction. If colleagues remember, Direction is the services for offender management all across Bedfordshire. And we were very happy to report that within 1 year, they've managed to engage with 400 were offenders now looking to change their life around, which I think within 1 year is a very substantial result. And it is our congratulations to all those who work there and the partners that have really welcomed them into that space. We've really seen positive results. So we're pleased with such a new and innovative initiative. We've also seen another result over the summer. The Counselling Foundation, who the OPCC fund, have managed to support directly 100 victims in 5 months A lot of those were directly related to pandemic and crime cases. So we're pleased that we've been able to bring in a supportive element. Some colleagues may know that at the weekend it was National Volunteering Day, and I think for the OPCC it's really worth highlighting to the panel. We could not operate and do some of the work without our core volunteers. We have volunteers in 3 core areas: ICVs, that's independent custody visitors. You may remember from an update a couple of months ago, I shared that we couldn't allow those volunteers to go directly into custody because of the pandemic. I have been so impressed with their response to the new system that my transparency manager, Katie Beaumont, has instigated with custody. Custody have responded really well and get the telephone directly to people who are within custody so that we can continue to make sure human rights standards are upheld, and also that custody officers are getting what they need from senior officers. So I'm pleased to report that that audit and assurance level is remaining. As soon as we can get people back in, we will, but at this time, until vaccines are fully rolled out, that is the way we'll be commencing with that post. So as part of the National Volunteer Day, we have written out and thanked each and every ICV colleague that we have. The other area of volunteers is stop and search scrutiny. So again, members have had the chair of the stop and search scrutiny panel come to this panel before to share that work. The OPCC are very intrinsically linked with it because it really is the true representative, a voice of the people at that meeting. I've been very pleased with how the force has been responding to that meeting, and we've really got the policy and process map sorted out for that new meeting. So again, it was a letter of thanks to everyone in that organisation. We also have 5 volunteers based in Signpost. Signpost, of course, you'll remember, is the victim centre. If anyone's been a victim of crime in Bedfordshire, they're supported by Signpost. But we actually have 5 volunteers who give their time to support people who are already fully qualified in that area. So I mentioned the celebration of those volunteers. We've also seen a really good increase the past 6 weeks since the last panel with our levels of engagement. So first of all, we had our annual survey that we've done. We gained a good return, but it's not enough. We must do it with other forms of engagement. Very difficult to do with the pandemic, but not impossible. We just needed to change our style. So to engage the youth of Bedfordshire, we are using an Instagram-based account and have been engaging people through that, which has seen a much better response than in previous years to purely the survey. Normally at this time of year, I would be reporting to you on the parish council event that we do, which is always really welcomed by the councillors. It pulls together the local policing element, areas that constituents are saying to their councillors that they want flagged to the police, and what we've been doing with that over the past year. We naturally couldn't hold that event, so instead we created a bit of a survey, but also a fact sheet that went directly out. We spoke with some councillors who told us that their main issue still to date was understanding who their local officers were. So we worked with Bedfordshire Police to make a step-by-step methodology of how you could establish who your local officer was, and also how you get local performance data. And we've been sharing that out. So I would like to think everyone has seen that. It's gone through the reps in the different areas. So we've got that engagement. And just lastly to mention, Chair, some of the campaigns that have happened over the past few weeks. We have had Black History Month, mental health awareness, the Volunteers Day I mentioned, and the Domestic Abuse 16 Days of Action. These were all significant events for us, and the OPCC took part in all of them to show our support, either in our role as being a champion for victims or in our role as bringing partners together. And that's the end of my update. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
So thank you, Claire. Members, any questions on Claire's update that aren't covered later on in the agenda? Let's just, yeah, Neil, Councillor Bunyan.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask Claire, good evening, Claire. I was going to ask the Commissioner, I was going to ask you about your shortlist for grants, but you've already answered that question very well in your preamble. So thank you very much for that. You saved me answering your question. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. And those letters will be out very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're muted, Chair.
Thank you, Neil. So Claire, one of the things that I've tried to make clear to members is making sure that members are well cited of the reports, etc. So appreciate your update to this point. What I'd like to try and do is to go through the 5 different reports that have been produced for this evening, and I know members have a number of questions on those. So we'll start with the report A. And I know
Chair, before you move on, Councillor Dodwell's got a hand up.
Yeah, and I'm going to cover that off now. So Councillor Dodwell wanted to ask some questions on that, but also on your previous report. I don't know if it's going to be substantive about both. So Councillor Dodwell, your opportunity.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question really on COVID-19. I note that Catherine regularly attends the COVID-19 strategy group. And I just wondered whether she felt the police were able to meet the challenges of dealing with the COVID-19 regulations and the policing of it, and whether they felt they were getting the support from partners such as local authorities in bringing this forward. Because I know in Part B, there's obviously financial pressures that are coming through from having to deal with this. I just wonder what your view was.
Yes, of course, Councillor. So it is a very timely and appropriate question. I think we've said before in previous panel meetings that it is a very difficult thing to police by essence. It is down to the government to, of course, bring laws and regulations in. It is down to policing to uphold them. We have had significant support from both partners and the public. It has been a rare occasion where we have had to go into any form of negotiation. I think this has really brought the public sector together, and where we have needed to do something or needed to press on any area, we have been fully supported. I would thank my chief executive colleagues for that, and the work that we have together has really supported it. I fully appreciate the work of the local authorities around COVID marshals, for example. That was a huge amount of work done in a very short amount of time. But the work and the collaboration with the policing has been exemplary. So I have no issues, but thank you for raising it. It is an important point.
Okay. Other questions on Part A? I've got a couple of comments to make, if I may, Claire.
Of course.
The theft of dogs has been raised with me in some other forums with my other hats on, etc. And as a local councillor, real concerns about the impact that particular crime has on families. Invariably, some of this has been burglaries, which is so that one that they get burgled, and then they steal the family pet. So I'm really pleased that the council, so that the commissioner has put a focus on this. But could I ask what's been done to publicise the dangers of the theft of dogs? A cursory look through the internet, if you're trying to find a puppy or a dog, the price is being asked now, running to the thousands of pounds. So it's a major crime, an organised crime, which has materialised out of COVID because people want pets.
Yeah, so Chair, you're absolutely right. This is one of those crime types that has emerged purely because of COVID-19. There were dog thefts previously, but often it would be linked to more rural animals that are known to be good at hair coursing or things like that. Traditionally now, you're spot on, it's pets. If you have a look on any of the common websites, and if you can find a dog under 2 years old, you are looking at the minimum of £3,000. That, to a criminal or someone who is criminally minded, is easy money. I knew it was an area that you wanted in the reports, and I was very tempted to pull out my dog, who is under my desk right now, but she's sleeping and behaving, so I'll leave her there. But I mention it because of the impact. If my dog was taken from my family home, I would know the impact it has. So when I was reading about those 25 cases, when I was looking into the detail, I really felt for the victims, because we are talking about a few working animals, but in the majority family pets. The impact is not just the theft of the dog, it is what it does to that family. I've been thrilled with the response from Bedfordshire Police and the findings that they've had, and we're still in the process of relocating some of those dogs. So if I could, I take any opportunity to plea. Microchipping is absolutely our best advice. We can get dogs back. We've had them where they've been stolen in Scotland and found right in the south of the country. If they've got that chip, we can trace things back. So I would stress that. Something the Commissioner has asked us to do is to work with citizens in policing to reinvigorate Dog Watch. So we've had successes with Speed Watch, neighbourhood watches. We know what intelligence can bring policing. It's no different just because it's a dog. We had similar results a year ago, if you remember, with the horse community. Horse community are fabulous at knowing each other's horses, who's got secured field, who may need a hand if something's going on in a particular area. We need that now from the dog community. I'm sure other colleagues on the line, like myself, who is a dog owner, links up to people on Facebook, and we know certain walking areas. We are asking the dog watches through the watches to give us that intelligence and to share crime prevention advice. I must say that some of these thefts that happened specifically, the owners had already done real substantial crime prevention. For some of these, especially where it was kennel locations, these were very targeted crimes. So I don't want every pet owner in Bedfordshire to be overly concerned, but I do want them to be prepared. Microchipping, good lighting, good security. When you go out late at night with your dog, make sure you're going out and you can see where the dog is, not calling out the name of your dog when you're far away from it. Someone else hears that name, they've got it, they've got a bit of chicken on them. Best dog in the world with recall is going to go for a nice bit of chicken. Simple steps to prevention is absolutely what we need there, but we are getting results and it is taken seriously.
Okay, thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions on Part A? Hild?
Yes, I think I was looking at the diary of engagement, and it's very kind of pleasing that 100 conversations with Black residents seem to be in full flow. How will the insights from those conversations be used, and will we get any visibility of some of the content of those conversations?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking, because it's an area that we must publicise once it's ready. I would estimate that we are looking at early spring for full completion, because even if we go beyond 100 conversations, all the better, because the more intelligence we're getting, the more views that we are accepting of, and listening to these voices is so important. I would suggest that we present the paper to you at a formal police and crime panel meeting. We do need to sense check it with everyone who has submitted. So we will have early interactions with every commentator on this report in January and February, but then I'll be very happy to present on the paper. We're not actually waiting on some of the actions though. A lot of this, the Commissioner is doing as she goes. If she gets really good ideas or requests from people, we're taking them straight to the Chief Constable through the Strategic Board or through the one-to-ones that she has on a weekly basis with the Chief Constable, and we're acting. We're getting people represented on IAG, the Independent Advice Group. We're getting people represented at Stop and Search and the Chief Constable's own community support group. We've had people that Catherine has spoken to who have now become part of that national group advising Gary on his national portfolio, which is really pleasing and something we didn't have before this 100 people commitment.
Okay, so can I ask officers to build that into the forward plan, that update, please? Okay, Jeremy, if you could capture that. We'll now move on to item B. Okay, so members, just pull up my report. So this is the Commissioner's reporting. So a lot of good detail in this report. So members, questions? I know, Paul, you wanted to ask a question with regards to victims of crime.
Yeah, domestic violence in particular, Claire. Good evening.
Good evening.
Nice to see you after such a long time in my absence. Page 23. Page 23. It says on my computer 6B1. Your emergency accommodation for domestic abuse. In your earlier address, you mentioned £140,000 of money's come into the organisation. Does that fund that £60,000 that's mentioned in the report? It's additional.
It is additional. We've been really successful with the DA funds. This is our third. Sorry, is that me?
Can I ask you to mute, Mr. Downing, please? I think that's the feedback coming from yourself.
Oh, apologies. So we've been quite lucky with DA funds. This is our third one. That initial 60,000 that the documentation refers to is what the Commissioner assigned. The new money is things that we can do for new activity, but it does need to be linked to a charity or community interest. Just to offer you a fuller update, as you've asked around the emergency housing, we found it incredibly successful. The force has now taken it back on and are working with the hotel that we found for it. But I'm really pleased that the partner that we chose, Reactivate, to do the houses for that longer term sort of intermediary cover, have continued to do it with support from local authorities. I'm really pleased.
Chair, that was my second question, really, about the longevity and the outside agencies stepping up to the mark. So I'm really grateful for that. Claire, is there? I guess each county has its own problems, and victims shouldn't necessarily be moved the distances. You know, they've done nothing wrong. But are there circumstances where you're engaged with either the 3 counties or the 7 counties in obtaining a haven?
Yeah. Sorry. So always the police officer background, Paul. I quite see where your question is from. You're quite right. There are situations when we cannot move people within the county and they need to go externally. We have relationships established for all that. So we have other OPCCs, other force areas where we will do an exchange. Often, though, that's managed through the National Refuge Line. So I wouldn't want to take away from them. They are really good at organising that. But for that often emergency care, it can be done within. But for anything of a more higher level nature, you're quite right, we go out of county.
Okay, thank you, Claire, for that. Amanda?
Yeah, I'm looking at page 24 of the paperwork. I'm really pleased to see that we're helping residents to combat fraud. And it mentions fraud blocker phones that are being provided by Age UK. And I wondered if you could explain to me how they work and how we're promoting them to residents.
You certainly can, because it's my favourite topic right now. So this came from an idea that I had a few months ago. If you remember, we took over the charity, the Bobby Trust scheme. And what we found was they were going out and doing a lot of physical prevention on homes and giving advice, which is great. But I know from personal experience with my own grandparents that I could explain things to them one day, they would totally get it. I could leave a reminder card right by the phone, but a week later, that advice is gone and someone will telephone them and be incredibly smart, professional, convincing, know everything about them, even pretend to be me or someone else that they know. And all of a sudden, you've got a much larger crime in progress to do with fraud than you ever would with a burglary or a robbery. Burglaries and robberies, incredibly impactful. We have victim care established. We have crime prevention established. On fraud, I would say we were behind the curve. What I really like about these phone blockers, and the reason why I went to Age UK, is I met with that chief executive about a year ago, and we spoke on different projects that we could work together on. And when I was thinking around how do we distribute this, how do I get it to the right people, they exactly came to mind, because they have that trusted relationship. They can go into people's homes. They do know who need them. So there are many forms of different call blockers. You can get ones that are like a device that looks like an old-fashioned answer phone that used to be separate from a phone. It can be plugged into your phone, but often you need a monthly subscription and you have to have someone to install it. I tried to do it and it was quite complex. And I thought, if I'm asking people to go out and help the elderly community with this, it needs to be plug and play, really easy, no monthly subscriptions. So eventually we found one at the right price point as well, which actually replaces the landline phone completely. So this isn't a mobile phone solution, this is a landline solution. But we do find that a lot of the elderly community still rely on a landline more than they ever would do a mobile phone. The phone I checked with Age UK is also the right sound level. The buttons are raised, so it's easy for them to use. So they're not losing anything from a physical phone that they would have. And we are able to go out and literally take out their old phone, leave it for them to do whatever they want with, plug in the new phone, and it blocks numbers that individual doesn't know. So what that means is when people call you from international lines or redirected calls, it will never ring. This means you are completely taking away so much opportunity from all those calls that people get around offering, you've won the lottery, there's someone that needs you to send them money, I'm your long lost relative, please send me this. It takes out that opportunity. And that's the bit I really like about these phones. Your second question around distribution. So we need to do it carefully because I only had a certain amount of money, but it's still quite a lot of phones going out initially for this proof of concept work. We are working with 3 organisations, so we're doing it threefold. We're going to work with Safer Streets, so that's going to be in Midland Road and in the Luton area. So when those people are going out installing the Ring doorbells, we can be offering the telephones in those high crime areas while we're there. The Bobby scheme that I spoke about already has a list of high vulnerable persons, and so we'll be going out and doing that work. The fire service work directly with us, so when they go out and do a call for a concern for safety, they will be going out and installing those phones as well. And then Age UK, we gave them their own batch of phones so they can go out to their highest risk residents where they know they've had people experience that before. Is that okay?
I think that's a really good explanation, and a fantastic scheme. So well done. I think I know Councillor Warburton wanted to talk about resources in terms of the Bobby scheme. So Councillor Warburton.
Not a councillor, Chair, but thank you.
Apologies, Mr. Warburton.
Thank you for the promotion. Good evening, Claire. Hope you're well.
Good evening, I am. Thank you.
Also, like to say, very impressed with the fraud blocker phone scheme. I think you're doing a sterling job there. And leading on from that, or connected to that, is item 2 on 6B, which is the Bobby van service.
Yeah.
And of course this goes hand in hand with what you've just been telling us about, and with the emphasis on safeguarding the most vulnerable in the community. Now, while specific numbers probably won't mean much to me in terms of being able to place it in any kind of context, what I would like you to give us a view on is whether this is being fully whether this is being appropriately resourced. Obviously, you know, we have excess demand on police resources than can ever be met. And working on the basis that, of course, that prevention is better than cure,
Yes.
and prevention not only for the primarily, of course, for the trauma aspect of that, but in raw numbers, prevention is cheaper than a cure. So, is this being appropriately prioritised and resourced? And over to you. Thank you.
Certainly. So first of all, I completely agree. Something that we have spent a lot of money on over the years is prevention, and also is offender management. I think sometimes people often confuse OPCC with only being around supporting victims instead of looking at those prevention techniques. So I'm glad that you've asked. This area is a little complex because not many OPCCs will have this charity. So it's not something you can compare a bar to. However, it is a charity, it has its own funding. I can't use police money to fund it. I can't use OPCC office money to fund it, but I could contribute to it if I felt appropriate. So where I need to look is 2 different areas. One, in policing, they still have a crime prevention team. So they have a suite of police staff linked with police officers who are going out and doing an element of crime prevention. The charity is the additionality, the so what else can we do, the phone blockers, the new ideas. So do I think it's resourced enough? Well, as chief executive of the charity, I'm going to say to you no, because I'm going to bid into any fund of money that I can to increase it all the time. Do I think that the most vulnerable people in Bedfordshire who want this service get it? Yes, I do. Do I think I've got a long way to go with turning the charity into even more successful? Yes. I've had it now for 7 months. I'm finally getting to the bottom of some of those things that you find when you take on a new organisation. I've got some new staff in there with some new ideas around prevention. And I think in the new year, with the trustees' support that work very hard, very diligently with me, I think we're going to actually see a turnaround. What I would like to give you in the future to answer your question in a more fuller capacity is, how many people in Bedfordshire do I think could benefit? How many people say yes, they want the service? And how many people can we give it to? The reason I can't answer you that exact numbers question now is because I can't offer it to the widest people that I want, because I need to not overpromise. When I'm dealing with vulnerable persons and elderly persons, I need to keep to my word. So we are operating at a level that is established through the most vulnerable, so that highest category. And I do think we're fulfilling that. Do I want to go bigger? Yes, I do.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question to that. When do you think it will be that there might be some objective data that will suggest a success in this? And one would expect, you know, reductions in distraction burglaries, reductions in assaults on the elderly within their residential homes. When would that be, do you think?
So I think, seeing as we've been operating at full capacity for a month now, I would like to give it at least 3 months worth of data. So if I could come back to the March Police and Crime Panel with a fuller report on the charity, I would really welcome that if the chair was happy for that, because I could also link into the success of the rollout of the phones.
Yeah, okay, I think that's more than happy with that.
Thank you, Chair.
Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Claire, unless I missed it, did you give us a unit cost for these call blockers?
I'm so sorry, I didn't.
Okay.
£35.53.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Answered.
I think it may be worth, Claire, if you were advertising this, to offer it, but for people to buy it, as well as an option. Okay, I certainly, my parents may not. I think they're in their 80s. They may meet your criteria, but if they didn't, I'd be more than happy to put my hand in my pocket to buy a phone that I know would prevent the issues for them. As I deal with around with my brothers, they can all contribute. But I think if it was advertised, you may not have to try and find all the funding yourself. I think there are many families out there that would want to support their vulnerable parents and grandparents.
Do you know, I quite agree, but I have a massive problem, which is why I was so pleased to have got the question around it. I wanted to advertise it as, can't think what to get your parents for Christmas, you know, why don't you invest in this? But the police and the OPCC cannot be seen to endorse a specific product. And because there aren't many different organisations that are producing this particular type, the legal team have said it's too close to home, I can't directly advertise it. So I'm working on a workaround where I'm quite descriptive about the product, but I name no particular branding to try and get it out there. We also have something around these people who we really need to protect. They don't have £35. If they've got people like your good self who can do that and support them, brilliant. But I think for this early pilot, we're going to gift it to people to really help. But I would ask everyone on this call, if they can, you know, reach out to people or make them aware that this is even there. I think that's a good thing.
Okay, all right. So we're going to carry on then looking at some other parts of this part of the report. And I want to focus on grants. So Hild, I know you had a question around grants.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what the impact of COVID has been on the progress of some of these grants, and whether there has been some flexibility for the organizations who have those grants in terms of milestones and targets.
Yes, you're quite right. So I did a brief update at the last panel on some of the changes that we've made, but the main impact was on anyone who was working directly with schools. I'm sure councillors will be aware that schools have really had to up their precautions and be careful about who is going in. A parent myself, so I know I can't even get in the gates anymore. So they are being very restrictive, but I understand why around who comes in. However, that is not a conclusion. That is not an end of the story. There are other ways to work with young people. We are able to still do some youth work elements. We are able to do some one-to-one in an open and okay space. But some of it we've had.
We seem to have lost Claire there. Hopefully she'll be back.
Yeah.
So Claire, if you can hear us, we can't hear or see you. That's it, you're back.
it just flashed that my network has gone, and I thought, oh no, I'm so sorry. Let me recap a little bit. So we are having the significant issues. However, no one has said to us that they aren't going to be able to spend the money. We've worked with each of them individually and reprogrammed the contract. So outcomes are still going to be the same. Numbers we expect to be the same, but delivery methods we've changed. We have given flexibility to the spend. So, for example, if somebody needed to go and buy equipment to work with young people to do something, we're allowing them to change that to deliver some equipment to someone and just do it in a slightly different way. It's just about evolving with it, and we've had no problem.
Okay. Neil, I know you had a question around grants.
Thanks, Chair. I believe I said earlier on, after Claire's preamble, that she actually answered my question in terms of timings and the finalisation of the grants.
Okay.
So she already answered that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Narwhal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Claire, good evening. I'm sure you already probably answered this question. Just wanted to know where are we with the Midland Roads update and what's happening there, and what has been done. So if you kindly could brief us on that, thank you.
Yes, of course. This is probably my second favourite topic at the minute, is the Save the Streets programme. So as everyone is aware, we were lucky not only with one bid, but two bids to Save the Street. The Midland Road project is going really well. We are fully up and running in Pre-Ben Street, but we couldn't do the launch event that we wanted to because of COVID-19. However, we're going to push it back and just do it where we welcome people one at a time to show them in a socially distanced way what that is like. The house-to-house events have been running, the advertising has been running, the leaflet dropping. We've had police officers, local authority, councillors all going out together doing that work, and we've been really pleased with the take-up so far. So specifically for the Midland Road area, we are on spend, we are on track, we are writing bid 2 to see if we can get a second year's worth of funding. All the organisations that worked with us during the bid have kept their word and are all going to be based out of Pre-Ben Street offices. So people will be able to go there and get support on crime prevention, authority advice, anything they need that they think is impacting their lives is going to be in one place to have that conversation. The ring doorbells have all arrived, all the other crime prevention methodologies are also there, and businesses have been really well brought in. I would be very happy to make sure that you were on the invite list for that Pre-Ben Street launch as well. If I could take that action, I'll make sure that happens.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate. Chair, if you don't mind, can I ask a sub question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Claire, the reason is that we're getting a lot of people asking, especially the Asian community in Midland Road, and the business people as well. This is the two issues I'm sure we are all aware of them. One is the drug dealing going on there, and the second is to do with the prostitution. And they would just keep asking this question, what is the police doing and where are we with it? Maybe this is not appropriate time, but if you could enlighten us with that something, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's no problem. I'm a bit concerned about the communication. We're working directly with Colleen Atkins. I wonder if I need to widen that out to make sure that everyone's got it, because every closure order we do, there's been loads recently directly within that area over the past few weeks. So it's only right and proper that we make sure everyone knows. So I'll make sure that you're getting the same briefing that others are getting on it, because there's a lot going on with some good results. The gating, everything that's happening to block out that drug dealing, you certainly need to know.
Okay. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so members, we're going to move on to report C now, which is recruitment. Okay, so Claire, thank you for a really good report on recruitment. I remember the number of questions, though, I know are going to come your way on this. So we'll start with Linda.
Yeah, I've just got a question. Obviously, the figures for the current year, they've clearly gone up between April and September. I was just wondering what you were sort of hoping your end number would be at the end of the year? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I was just on mute, so I didn't get the echo back. So we are on target. We can only go to the number that we have funded. So we are still going up to the, I believe it's 1356, and I'm just going to check my paper. Yeah. So everyone who is currently in our stream that goes to the College of Policing for the assessments, we have enough in our pot to get through those 3 stages to come out. The bit that we need to do, and why every year we keep doing the spending review, where we put forward the information to government and we ask for those special grants, is because we need more than what we have the allocation for. The 3-year successful run of the allocations we've had for the special grants have seen us pay for the overtime and all the excess of hours. We needed to translate that into officer numbers, but actually it goes a bit wider than that. So although I can give you the figures around officer numbers, what we really need from government and from other organisations is the support that goes with it. If we're increasing, and if you look at the volume of increase that we've had over the years, you're going to understand we need more HR, we need more ICT support, we need more training, we need more facilities. But also, we were having that conversation earlier around crime types changing. That's not going anywhere. We don't always need warranted powers to deal with some of the criminality. Everything that 5G is bringing us is great and very progressive, but it will come with new crime. And that's where you wouldn't need a community police officer, you need a cyber specialist. And even when you've got a community officer going out and engaging with a young person around something that's just happened to them, I'm going to need a resource back at HQ that's going to be able to look at that phone, download everything in seconds. Because we were also finding, if we ask young people or anyone, if we need their phone for 5 or 6 months, not many of us would part with it. So the more resource we can get, you know, mine sat right here, we won't be too far, will we? We need to make sure that we've got resource matching the officer numbers. So we are pleased with those numbers, but we would always need more. Our biggest area is detectives. The detective angle is where we need the focus. It is a skill, remember the whole baby boom scenario, everything that affects national statistics also affects policing. So where we had the baby boom and we had a lot of people coming in at sort of 18 and a half, they in recent years have all come up to retirement. I knew some fantastic detectives that have sadly gone, and when they're no longer here to use their skills, which is why we've got that programme of some retired detectives coming back and sharing their skills. We're having to give them some updated courses because things change over the years, but their skill set we are having to bring back, and a lot of that is because of that 6-year gap we had in recruitment where we could do nothing. Tied our hands, all of a sudden you've got 6 years to fill.
Having that, just in response, that's really helpful. Having that sort of context that sits beneath those numbers is, I think, is certainly very helpful for me in terms of looking at if you've got a block anywhere, or if you've got people that you'd like to move on that aren't moving on, and that's stopping you bringing people in at the bottom. So that level of detail is very, very helpful. And the only other comment I wanted to make was something from slightly earlier in the reports, is that the Commission has clearly done a lot to try and improve the well-being and the working conditions of staff. And hopefully that is helping with retention as well as recruitment. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, really.
Thank you. That is ever so kind of you, because it's been a huge focus of hers for the past 4.5 years. I would say in this past 6 months, even during the pandemic, we've been able to do so much more in improving it. The letters that she's had, the emails that she's had from officers who've reached out and said, thank you for thinking of us. Thank you for coming and improving this space, so that when I can grab 5 minutes, and that is all they get, that they can come in and have it in a semi-nice environment. We are very lucky to have a commissioner with very good taste who can do things on a small budget. So it's worked out for us greatly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hendricks.
Yeah, just wanted to follow up. It is not direct. Well, it is related to recruitment, but not directly. I noticed that overtime has gone up quite a bit, probably because of the COVID pressures, etc. And then the associated budget for that has gone up as well. How is that impacting on kind of officers' well-being and ultimately then retention potentially?
Yeah, so you're absolutely spot on. Having to been, I'm currently married. Currently, that sounded awful. I'm married to a police officer in Bedfordshire, so I know what it's like when you get the call for overtime last minute. It does have that big impact on retention. You're quite right. However, where we are is that there is a real high level of public service motivation, and it's still there. Yes, everyone is tired, but with the initiatives that we can do to reach out and support, I think the officers are seeing that there is care, there is the want to look after them. And it's not just with things like the nicer spaces to take a break in, it's around when we come out of this, we do want to look at training, progression, things to keep people within the roles that they love, but we just need to make even better for them to have that pride of role. So that's something that we're definitely looking at. Attraction is great, retention is key, is what I would say.
Okay. So, Mr. Weir?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Claire.
Good evening.
Hi. I noticed from the report on budgeted recruitment there are some really positive outcomes with increasing numbers of frontline officers and also the increase in BAME officers, which is really good news. So thanks to the Commissioner, the office yourself and the force for that. It's really encouraging. Can you, on behalf of the Commissioner, confirm how well we are doing with the retention of police officers? I note that the forecast is to lose 120 per year. And what plans are there to ensure the benefit of this uplift is being noticed across our policing area, and especially rural parishes, given that the rural policing teams are spread so thin, and also our market towns?
Very much. So it's a very smart question. It's something that we need to be looking at all the time. I think it comes back to the statement I made around attraction is great, but retention is key, especially in the more country areas where I had feedback from a councillor the other day who said they get to know their local officer, they build a trust, they build a confidence, and then they seek promotion and they move on. And this is where we have a really hard line, because promotion is something that keeps people in policing generally, because not everyone, but a lot of people want to move forward with their careers. However, when someone can stay in post longer, it is greater for that area. The force have recognised this and they're addressing it. And the way they're addressing it is longer lead times into promotion, so that as somebody comes into that position, especially in those community policing numbers, those 67 that we said would be in and now are in full, they have a greater lead in to pass over any information. So it's not just handing over crime logs, it's handing over, this is your counsellor, here's your kin member, here's your independent advisory group, here's your hotspots you need to be focused on, here's some great contacts. If we can support that interaction of having people together before people move on, it will keep people in that post longer, because you will feel more grounded, you will feel that you're in a better place from day one, and hopefully partners will feel that they too have had a much smoother process. Retention figures, you're spot on. So it is 120 per year that we always estimate that we'll be losing. That is increased from previous years. Again, a lot of that is linked to national statistics where we have people coming up for retirement. We do have the big pensions decision going on. We still don't have all the results of that. That is going to impact us. We have to accept that either way, people will need to make a decision. And I will respect their decisions, because everyone has a family to consider, a future to consider. But as an organisation, we need to plan for both, know that we've got enough budget to support it. But also, this is about forward planning, making sure that we've got people who can step into those roles. So that is definitely our focus.
Okay, I know Councillor Graham wanted to ask some questions with regards to BAM.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Claire. I note.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, I noticed that the proportion is rising from 14.2 to 15.8, and I wondered what your proportion of BAME officers is, and when would you anticipate achieving that proportion?
So, okay. What's the target, and when will we get there?
Okay, so a very good area to focus on. One, I'm sure colleagues will remember that I was working on for the force before I came over to the OPCC all those years ago. So I know it well, and we have gone up and down with that percentage. So although I am pleased with the force, I am not satisfied because there is room to grow. Here comes our problem. Here comes the results of those 100 conversations. So I have listened in to quite a few of the commissioners' calls with the attendants knowing that I'm on the line as well. And people are saying to us, when we ask, how do we do this? How do we improve representation across policing? They say to us, you need to improve trust in policing with the community. Commissioner's next question, okay, how would we do that? And they will say, you need to have more people in policing that look and feel and have the same values as us. And we say, okay, but that's what we're asking you to do. So we need to get the trust by getting people in, but we can't get people in without having the trust. So we are in this cycle. I don't think it's an endless one. I think it's one that just takes time. And it's about how we share messages. So that 15% that we're talking about, best we look after them. Best we make sure they have a positive experience with Bedfordshire Police. Because if trust is the important thing here, and I think we can all understand why that is, we need to make sure that they are communicating with their family, with their friends, with their communities, that they are having a positive experience as a police officer, that they feel they've come into a positive organisation and that they're there for the role they joined for. So I think this is about how we communicate those results. We can't force anyone into this role. It's such a specific role. It's more of a calling. You either have it in you or you don't. But sometimes people have it in them a little bit. And with more information about the role, we can invoke it in them. And that's what I think we need to do by looking after those that do come over and do work in policing. This is not a new thing. You know, the debate around race and representation is not new. This is one that we should treat as a positive experience, that people need to feel supported. We want everyone in policing, specifically Bedfordshire Police, to feel proud to work where they do. We won't have that unless we really focus on what makes people trust the organisation.
Okay, thank you, Claire.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, certainly.
Claire, I'm wondering, which I'm not seeing in these statistics, what the position is with the special constabulary and how recruitment is with the BME population within the special constabulary, and perhaps what can be done to attract volunteers.
Yeah, certainly. So it wasn't requested in the paper, so that's why the data's not in there. But it is something that if the panel would like that, I can certainly get that data on the special constabulary. It does look very similar. So I would say if we think about the role of special constable, it is practically the same as a PC. They will have the same powers. It is just that one is not getting paid and the other does. So when we are looking to people to come into that space, you're actually looking for people with similar public service motivation. We're also having the same issues. Why people wouldn't want to come and volunteer is the same reasons as why they may not want to come into the full-time paid position. They need the trust. They need to hear what it is like to police in Bedfordshire. I think we're starting to improve things with our recruitment campaigns. So what we've done, we were finding that we were, excuse the expression, Chair, but robbing Peter to pay Paul, because we were stealing from specials, getting them across and putting them in full-time positions. The specials are trying to run their recruitment campaigns at the same time as the force are running theirs. That's clearly never going to work. So we have altered that, and the recruitment teams now work fully together under the same communications team. So they are going in and looking at the type of people that are showing interest and doing this in a much more intelligence-led approach. Who would be right and a better fit for specials gets left to the specials to progress. Who is right for full-time gets left for the full-time officers to progress. I'm very happy to bring you the data on specials, but I fear we have the same issues there. I don't think it's much different.
I'm grateful, Claire. Thank you. I mean, of course, fully agree with everything you said there. But there is one perhaps distinction that you didn't articulate, which is, of course, that people who have other careers that they don't want to give up can still be specials. And it might be that the sections of the community who are invested in their primary career, which would stop them becoming regular officers, but they might still be interested in the 4 hours a week averaged out that a special is it commits to, and therefore, you know, there's a margin that perhaps are available to complement the force as it is.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever come up with race being an area as to why somebody would give up their time or not give up their time. It hasn't come up.
Yes, sorry, we were cross purposes there. I wasn't thinking specifically in race, but I mean across the community, there will be people who have, as you say, the calling, but they are invested in their own careers, and that is for them something that they wouldn't give up. But of course, they could become specials as well, and it might be that the force being proactive across the whole community in that regard, which I'm sure it already is, but we don't have the data and we haven't asked for it, but I would be interested in it. I'm sure my colleagues would as well.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of the fundamental recruitment process, isn't it? If someone doesn't have enough time, but they show that interest, have that calling, we would look on them as being a special instead of a PC on the payroll, most definitely.
Okay, so I think from that, Claire, it'd be worth having a look at a future paper on what's the specials like, in terms of recruitment, so we get a better idea on that as well. Okay, so what I'd like to do now, then, members, is to move on to item D, which is the VERU. Okay, so members, so there's a fairly short, comprehensive report, and we've taken lots of in-detail reports recently on the VERU, so this is a bit of an update on that. So, members, I know, Mr. Dowling, you wanted to ask a couple of questions around the VERU.
Yeah, I appreciate it's been a long evening, so I'll keep it really short. VERU is something that's come to light since I last was on the panel, and I think it's the right thing to do. I've been involved in mentoring kids recently for a charity, and the weak point I found is not the other agencies, it's not the schools, but it's the parents. And I'm just wondering, is there any emphasis within VERU about looking at what good parenting might be?
Yes, absolutely. So, sorry, that's me. Right. There are 3 programs of work connected with the VERU to do with parenting. This was a direct request from the Commissioner, as she really felt that it wasn't anything to do with a lack of will. It was a lack of education around some of the areas around parenting. And so she sourced 3 different organisations that had a good local representation, good local knowledge base as well, to come in and work with very young parents. So parents who possibly didn't plan to have a family as early as they did, may not have built up some of those life skills that we all eventually will get. So how do they get their knowledge if they don't have that direct mentoring, if they're not linked to a scheme? So we have 3 of those running with the VERU that have proved really, really well. And it's a similar thing with our own funding in OPCC, where it was supposed to be direct physical contact, one-to-one or a group setting. We've moved to virtual and it's been fine since. So yeah, spot on question, that's the area we're funding.
Okay. So Claire, I'm just very mindful that Ms. Dan is fairly new to the panel. and there's a lot happened on Veru or with Veru over the last sort of year and a half, etc. If there's a briefing document that you could forward to Paul, I'm sure he'd appreciate that. So he gets a better understanding of the sheer scope and size of what Veru is doing and the importance of that to moving forward on some of the KPIs that the force has. So that would be useful. The next question is just in terms of long-term planning, and that's from Councillor Dodwell.
Yes, and Veru's been quite successful. I know the children's services at Central Bedfordshire Council talk very highly about the projects that are being run. I just wondered what the long-term plan was for Veru, because obviously it's funded by a series of sort of grants, and it's something we would really not want to lose within the county. And I know that there's pressure on the budgets at local authority level and there is at police level. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, thank you. A very appropriate question. Whenever you have a funding pocket like this, where it's year to year, it comes with its risks. Built into all the bids that we have to write to acquire these monies needs to be an exit strategy. So we do have a current exit strategy for the Veru. However, with the financial reports that we all got 2 weeks ago from the Lord Chancellor, we know that the government do want to fund. They didn't specifically say Veru, but they have said violence amongst young people. In my head, that translated as they were funding in Veru in 18 areas. They may well want to continue. However, they may say, okay, you 18 areas who have had 2 years running of this money, we're now going to give it to other areas because you've had your time with it. That might be a real thing. And if it is, I do think there is a way out. Number one, the exit strategies were built in, and we have enough associations that can take on anyone that we were working directly with. No one will be dropped. No one will come off of any records. No safeguarding will be breached. However, Central Beds recently did a piece of work with U-Turn Futures where they are seeking to potentially fund one youth intervention scheme officer for their area on lower level interaction. So where young people have not come into the justice system, are not maybe on the radar of the Veru yet, but are in those real early phases, I would say if that goes really well and works out, there may be something we would want to do with the local authorities to replace that element of the Veru, because it's that bit that isn't replaceable. Everything else we have an exit strategy for. However, let's see what March brings us. If it brings us the full funding again, we're going to bid back in and we will keep Veru going. If it doesn't, I'll be reaching out to my chief executive colleagues to discuss how we can keep the most successful elements of Veru going.
Okay. Councillor Hendricks, any other question with regards to theory of change?
Yeah, just very quick question. In the report, it is mentioned that the Veru is working with independent evaluators to produce review outcomes and evidence framework and a theory of change. And then it says document confidential. Why would a theory of change be confidential? It just outlines the core of the project as to how you will achieve what you hope to achieve. So yeah, can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I certainly can. So theory of change, no, you're quite right, it's not confidential. The report is, because it goes to Home Office, and it's going to also, these evaluators are evaluating other Verus. In other areas, they're called VRUs. So this is going to map across quite a few. That's a lot of personal data about young people that's not going to go into the public space. What will be the executive summary of it, and it will also be the audit report. So there are a few ways that Veru is audited. They have the OPCC, who on a monthly basis get the report that comes to the strategic board that I ask for. I then have to present to the Joint Audit Committee that is on a bi-monthly basis. I have the external auditor here that we mentioned that we need for the Home Office bid. And then, of course, I have panel where I will also bring you this information. So I'm convinced I'll be able to bring you the executive summary of that will also include the other members of the VRUs across the country. But I can say it wouldn't be the full report just because of the data there.
Okay, thank you. You satisfied with that, Hild?
Yeah, I would like to, I mean, when it's ready, I would definitely like to see the executive summary, obviously. And I think we should, as a panel, see that.
Okay.
No problem.
So members, I'm going to move on now to 6E, which is the burglary report. So I know there's a a number of questions from different members on this one. So we'll start with Paul.
Hi, Claire. It's my specialist subject, really, as you'll probably appreciate.
I know, hence why I'm dreading the question.
No, don't. Listen, I enjoyed reading it, but I'm not sure what I read.
Okay.
As far as the report's concerned, it showed 3 years of crime data mapped to a particular areas.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get in the way of another question that will be following this up, but really it's around that analysis. I didn't see enough analysis. So I don't know what days of the week, I don't know what hours of the day, I don't know how we've measured the police response so far as the analysts are suggesting there could be greater, higher visibility policing. Difficult thing to measure. I haven't seen what other interventions might have been put in place, and some of the numbers actually pleasantly surprised me because they were quite low. So for a hotspot, they're actually when I did the conversion into 3 years, number of crimes. It's 1 every 7 days. How does that make that a hotspot? I think I could live with that. I'd just be interested in your views. And I appreciate this report is for the panel, and it's probably not an operational report, because if that went to someone sitting looking at your control strategy or looking at allocating resources and around efficient allocation of resources, I wonder whether burglary. It is in Ian Delgado Street, obviously, because his neighbours are being broken into all the time in his houses. But I just wonder whether, and I hear what I'm saying, is burglary as big a problem that takes as much of demand as it is?
Okay, so I'm completely with you. I understand.
Paul, can you mute your mic, please?
Sorry, it's something it doesn't like me on yours. Sorry, Paul. So you are completely right. The reason why we wanted to share this documentation is because of the seasonality of burglary. I don't need to explain to you the impact that burglary has and the seasonality.
We seem to have lost Claire, unfortunately.
I'll let Hildy obviously build on to the next question. I'll cut out. It sounds like Claire's going to answer my question satisfactorily. Chair.
Okay, so we'll wait for Claire to come back in, hopefully. Claire, we can't hear or see you, Claire, so you may need to log out and log back in again. The joys of online meetings, I'm afraid.
Oh, I'm back. Hello. Am I back?
Okay. We can certainly hear you now, Claire. So
right, let me. I think it was eating into my bandwidth, and it told me I had a problem. Can you still hear me? Okay with my video?
You're fine. You're fine now.
Right. So my apologies, Paul. So you're quite right. The point of this report is the seasonality of it. For a year and a half now, we've had some good results by doing this hotspot data work. So although you're right, a couple of them, I would say 2 out of the 5 are not hotspots that you might see in other prolific areas. They are still hotspots across our data. What the officers in this area were doing was engaging known burglars as they were coming either back into county or out of prison to really try and push out of those areas without dispersal. So we didn't want to just move the problems and situations on. What this data also gave us was where could we target our crime prevention? So, okay, we know our offender management for the hotspots, but why don't we go in and flood the areas with crime prevention? I already mentioned that there were still officers and staff within the crime prevention team. This is where we're sending them, specifically on the burglary initiatives. It is something that you're right, numbers are not sky high like they used to be. About 5 years ago, this was a major problem. I would say the pandemic has had something to do with it. We have had more people at home, therefore the risk is increasing. Sadly, what that gets us is more aggravated burglaries. So that number is slightly up, but I think that is a direct correlation to the pandemic. It's just that more people are in. An interesting crime type that has also increased is thefts from vehicles, because people weren't going out and checking on their vehicles as much as they were because people were at home. and therefore the reporting was a lot slower. Therefore, lines of inquiry were a lot less. So we are seeing things with other areas, but because of the impact burglary has, that's why I shared that paper. If you saw the unredacted version, I think you'd be happier, but it's one I can't put out into the public domain.
Okay.
I understand that. Can I just, sorry, Chair, having said I'll pass it straight over. Claire, just remind the Commissioner and those that compile these reports that your 3-year plan around fighting crime talks about a control strategy that's based on the root causes and not crime types. So the root causes. So there's something in there, and I'm glad you mentioned offender management there, but there's something about working multi-agency, trying to work out who these Herberts are and trying to deflect them and divert them, as you say. So thanks for that.
Okay, so move on to Councillor Hendrick.
You're quite right, I agree.
Councillor Hendrick.
Yeah, I think you've partly answered my question. The question about the report was basically the so what. So what actions have been taken as a result of this report? Is this reflected in priority-based budgeting, or just so what?
Certainly. So part of that goes back to that crime prevention element, where we're placing people, where we're asking people to go. A massive so what is the fire service. So the fire service have picked up those areas for us. So whenever they're coming back from a job, they are doing drive-bys of areas that we know to be high hotspot areas, because again, like Paul said, prevention much better than cure. Damien said it earlier as well. So if we've got visibility, it doesn't always need to be a police vehicle to put offenders off offending in an area. Nice big red shiny truck that will put people off driving through, and we are seeing real results with that. They can't do it for everywhere, we know that, but if we can target those areas like the 5 that we've presented, it's definitely affecting the numbers.
Okay. Mr. Weir wanted to ask some questions with regards to rural crime.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I actually covered those in my original question, but I just wanted to, I know you talked about the numbers and the retention and the losses. What's the proposal to deploy the additional officers across the rural communities? Are there identified numbers that are going to be put out into rural areas? Is there going to be an increase? Is there a top stop on how many are going out?
Yep, certainly. So no one has touched the rural numbers. They are, as promised, they were still the ones that were brought in 2 years ago. There was a changeover in leadership in it. So if anyone is picking up on anything to do with communication, to do with that team, please do let me know. We haven't been able to do the annual farmers event that we do this year. And that used to be instrumental in linking people up with that team. So I think that's still an action for the OPCC to look at how we just improve that communication. There is not a large hotspot area to do with burglary, with some of the most rural, but some of those are definitely rural areas. But it's literally a 50-50 mix, because burglars still find going out to that sort of an area is a much higher risk than just getting into a town address and disappearing in an alleyway. Out in the countryside, it is much more difficult. So we are there. Chair, probably just need to address a comment in the chat bar. It says that the fire service don't know about the red route. They definitely do, because I have a monthly meeting with fire. So I can share that information with colleagues if needed.
Okay, if you would be so kind, please, Claire. Right, so
yeah, no problem.
Farmers event leads nicely into a request from Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Mr. Weir has basically asked my question. It's a comment, really. I see that you're talking about hotspots, which are basically urban, but you'll expect it from me, won't you, Claire? Because I have a rural ward. It is, of course, about coverage for the rural areas. I would like to see statistics about agricultural theft, because, okay, it's easy to get into a house and pop out again, but if you've just targeted a tractor that's well over £100,000 because it's going straight to the continent, that is a huge one-off, if you like. So I would like in the future, if we could have statistics with regard to specifically to agricultural theft and rural theft, because you referred to surveys in the beginning of your argument. I've just come from a parish council where they have declined to fill in your survey because question 1 was which of these 3, choose one only, is your strongest problem. And since all 3 were equally strong, the parish council gave up at that point. So it's difficult. I think maybe means of communication to the rural areas, and I've said this before, could be improved, but I would really like to see statistics about agricultural theft put onto our agenda.
Okay, so Claire, are you happy that we build into the forward plan an update? Oh, Claire's just disappeared. We'll wait for her to come back again. Luckily, we're getting towards the end of the panel business on the Commissioner's part, so we'll wait for Claire.
Sorry, I'm back. It really does not like me this evening.
That's right. So we're getting near towards the back end of your part of the agenda anyway, I'm pleased to say. So in terms of the forward plan, okay, okay, I think we would ask that we bring a report on agri-crime and rural crime. And what
certainly
is doing in terms of targeting, etc. Very mindful there's an awful lot of people in this meeting who actually represent fairly rural wards, as most of Bedfordshire is. So
probably just need to explain. So this report is on burglary dwelling, so that's people's homes. It isn't on business locations. Agricultural theft is under a different category. So if you offer me a full plan of what you want to look for, I can bring that, no problem.
Bring that back into the April-May period, okay? And we look at it then. Okay. You happy with that, Alison? Yes, good. Okay, she's nodding away there. All right, so members, that comes to the end of the Commissioner's part of the panel business. So Claire, thank you for filling in this evening. You're welcome to stay for the rest of our business this evening, but I know you're very, very busy. Please give our best wishes to the Commissioner, and we're going to move on with the rest of our agenda now. Okay, but as I say, you're welcome to stay, you're welcome to leave. Okay? So
thank you. I'll stay, but I'll turn my video off so that I can hopefully hear you better. My apologies, and thank you and good evening.
Okay, thank you. So members, we now move on to item 7, which is the unreasonable complaint policy and procedure. Members, you received an update on this. So the panel is recommended to endorse the use of the Bedfordshire Borough Council unreasonable complaints policy and procedure as set out in the Appendix A that you received, okay, to deal with individuals making unreasonable or persistent complaints against or in relation to the panel. To note under the provisions of Section 3.1 of the policy, Bedfordshire Public Borough Council monitoring officer or their nominee will act as an appropriate service area director in consultation with the chair or vice chair to the panel, and to decide whether complaints should be treated as unreasonable and the appropriate action to be taken. And thirdly, to note that under provisions of Section 3.3 of the policy, a review will be undertaken by the clerk to the panel or their nominee in consultation with the police and crime panel complaints subcommittee if there's an outcome on that. And members, there's been a bit of discussion around this, so I'm going to open it to the floor. So members, your comments, thoughts, please. None? So are members happy that we endorse this at this stage? I do have a couple of comments to make.
Chair, if I may.
Yep.
I have just one comment. I do endorse the proposal, but what I would like to see is an interpretation of some of the wording in the Bedford Borough Council policy for our use. So the Bedford Borough Council policy uses words like frequently, persistently, regularly, unreasonably, and I think it would be fair to all involved if in adopting the Bedford Borough Council policy we had an interpretation recorded that said when these words are made, when each of these words are used, this is what they mean, and we work out what we propose that they mean. However, I am conscious that if the policy has to be adopted as it is, it may not be possible for us to do that within the remit that we have. But that is what I would. That's my wish list for this.
Okay, all right, Mr. Downing.
Yeah, I appreciate that there'll be some work done to revise what is a document which states it was revised in 2011. I wouldn't want to bring something stale to the party, so a revision just to say that everything is still in order. I'm sure things haven't moved on that much, but I'd just like to see it brought up to date.
Okay, Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I'm perfectly happy for this to go through, as long as we are quite clear that in the future there will be a process by which we as a panel will be able to make our own amendments to it in the future.
Okay, so
we will look into ways of actually doing that.
Okay, so I'm going to bring our legal representation in here. Sue, if you could make some comments on this, please.
Yes, sorry, Chair. We will look at how we can actually facilitate that to make sure that the panel can have an input into the way it's amended, or actually be in control of the policies as they go forward.
Okay, so I'm very mindful that as Mr. Downing has stated, that this policy was last reviewed by Bedford Borough in 2011. I have been informed by Sue and I separately that this will be reviewed as part of Bedford Borough Council's review of policies. We will need to amend our terms of reference as a panel to allow us to amend the policy going forward. So my recommendation to the panel is that we endorse the use of the Bedford Borough panel rules, okay, as laid out, but that we bring forward via advice from the solicitors and from our panel officers a methodology to review this so that it fits in with how we would like to see it. Okay, are members happy with that? Yep. Okay, so thank you, members. We'll now move on then to item 8. Okay,
Chair,
so
Chair, sorry, it's Jeremy. Just to say that there are some resolutions there. Would you like to just pass those?
Yeah. So okay, so members. Okay, so that's in recommendations. So can I take this on block? Recommendations 1, 2, and 3. Members happy? 1, 2, and 3. That's yes. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Members, we'll now move on to item 8, review of the whistleblower allegations into the Commissioner's expenses. Members, I'd like to resolve that the proposal that is proposed that the report from the PCC's Chief Financial Officer at the time who conducted the whistleblower investigation is reviewed by the complaints panel. Therefore, there'll be no discussion at this point, and officers would arrange for the panel to be convened to review that report from the Chief Financial Officer and to make recommendations back to the full panel. Members happy with that? Yeah, okay. So, Jeremy, if you could arrange a date, obviously we've got the names of the new panel to use on that one. Okay. Moving on then to item 9, decision notice in relation to a complaint against the panel members. Mr. Kane, who was the chairman of the panel, has asked that the panel are updated on the outcome of a complaint. Members are aware that a complaint was made against the previous chair of the panel, Mr. Kane, and myself by a member of the public. Following investigations and an independent view of the outcomes of those investigations, it was found that members did not break or breach any code of conduct or commit actions which were contrary to the Nolan principles. Okay, so that's the statement we're reading out on that one. So that's for noting. Now we'll move on to item 10, which is feedback from the National Conference. Now, members, I've got to say there was an excellent conference which was carried out by the national body on the 23rd to the 25th of November inclusive. A number of members attended this, either its entirety or parts of it, in areas that there were a number of workshops which members expressed an interest in. Okay, we've asked everybody who attended these to provide some feedback, and Jim Weir is going to give the panel some feedback this evening on the content of that. So, Mr. Weir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was a really good conference. And I'll preface what I'm going to say that as a new member of the panel, I still have a lot to find out about how the force interacts with the Commissioner and indeed the panel. So what I thought of as innovative and good practice, we may already be doing, so there may not be much to learn from me on this, but at least my observations. I thought the plenary sessions before the individual workshops, there were some very good speakers. I was impressed by the passion and the really simple approach by the Chief Constable of Hampshire, Elizabeth Pinkney, who, when it came to things like working together in the communities with other agencies, and this was something that I thought I'd picked up on throughout the conference, and it was really good to try and understand that. There were some surprising things in there as well. And Andy Burnham, for instance, also did a piece about collaboration, and that as Mayor of Greater Manchester, astonishingly, he had both roles as the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Chief Fire Officer vested in his mayoral responsibilities, which I thought was crazy. Obviously, deputies would pick this up, but I did find that quite astonishing. There was another impressive speaker, the Chief Fire Officer for Staffordshire, Rebecca Bryant, and she did a brilliant presentation, and that was also about collaboration. This is my theme. As the Staffordshire Fire Service is combined with the Police Commissioner. But what did surprise me, there's always an opportunity to learn, was that the Police and Crime Commissioner responsibilities when taking on the fire service have some major differences. The PCC actually became the employer of the fire service staff, but also the enforcing authority. And the strangest of all was that Chief Fire Officer, unlike Chief Constables, does not have any operational independence. I think anybody that was there, it was quite apparent that it didn't sit well with the Chief Fire Officer, and who would agree otherwise. So if we do, as an organisation, combine the two, there's lots to think about there. I also attended the Grant Thornton's presentation, and that was interesting around funding issues, and particularly now in light of COVID-19 and the reduced precept collection. One of the graphs showed that the increase in precept as a total overall funding had moved now to, and it's standing at just over 7% for our force. And out of all the forces, this was the fourth highest. And then I started to think about if collections are going to be so badly hit as predicted, then I'm not sure if we've got a problem coming towards us bigger than we think, because there's going to be a massive gap that needs to be plugged. Usable reserves for our force have been on the average of 10% of gross expenditure. So I found the presentation useful and informative to me, and helped me as a new panel member to start understanding some of the financial issues. They then talked about changes in governance, which was interesting from an auditor's point of view, and the change from an annual audit letter to an auditor's annual report. Ka-ching, I think. They made much of the presentation by the review by Sir Tony Redmond and about the clear roadmap that he was describing towards reinforcing transparency and accountability, which I'm sure we'd all welcome. And they also referred to value for money quite a lot. I hope that flows through to another statement they made about audit fees having fallen to an unsustainably low level. So yeah, they would mention value for money, wouldn't they? Again, I'm picking up on my theme about collaboration and working together. The Leicestershire force highlighted their very effective setup for dealing with mental health issues. And as a governor of a mental health trust, I was really interested in this. Dealing with mental health issues in the community by exploring interdependencies in policing and mental health. And they have and again, I may be telling people something that they already know, but this PAVE team, as it's called, is a joint initiative between Leicestershire Police, Leicestershire Partnership, NH Trust and Turning Point. And it's funded by the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. And it's been specifically introduced to work with individuals who have complex needs and present to service on a regular basis. PC Mark Everett, who was part of the team from the policing side, said that the success of the triage car they used is down to the expertise, professionalism, and empathy of all those involved and synergy of working together. But the interesting thing was also, he said that the potential reduction in officer time because of what they're doing was worth 554 hours a week to the force, which is quite mind-blowing, really. So I was really interested in that. I think the other bits and pieces that came through were in discussions with other PCP members from other areas, and they talked about networks and best practice sharing. So not sure how much of that we do either. But my overall impression was that there were some really good speakers. There's a lot of impassioned people sitting on police and crime panels up and down the country. So if we haven't got a network system going, I would be happy to try and get involved in something like that.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Jim, for a very comprehensive update. I think some of the takeaways, and I'm going to make one comment first, is in terms of the mental health triage, it's something that the Commissioner brought in a long time ago, or quite a couple of years ago, and it's been very effective for Beds Police as well. So it's great that that's actually getting out to other forces. I was quite impressed with the sheer number of people that got engaged with this particular event. I think being online probably got more people involved that wouldn't have in the past have driven all the way up to Warwick University to take part in this. So I think hopefully they've captured that. They'll do a lot more online events in the future, which I think will be much more helpful engaging members of the public or members of panels who don't have the capacity to travel halfway around the country to get to a meeting. I know that Paul Danning made copious notes, 10 pages of them. So we're going to make sure that those notes are shared with everybody as well. What I would say is I think they have captured the fact that there's the ability to do more meetings, etc., and do them online as part of the panels, the joint panels network. So my recommendation to everybody is if you get the opportunity to go onto these, please do so. It will help to upskill you going forward. Okay. So I think that's probably enough on that one this evening. Very, very useful. We'll come on to our work programme now. So members, you've got a copy of the work programme. There has been a number of items which have been raised this evening. So hopefully, Jeremy, if you've picked those up, we can take those up separately with Claire and build those into our agenda going forward. Members, I'm very mindful that within the work programme, we don't have any training items on there. So are there any areas that members want us to focus on in terms of training? And we can bring that forward as well. Were you happy for me to pull stuff together as we go forward? But I do want to look at where you have gaps, where you think we really want to try and upskill you to become a better user or better member of the panel. Claire.
Sorry, Chair, I just had a thought as you were discussing training. With PCC elections coming back round, we know there is going to be possibly a delay while we roll out vaccines, but there will still be an election. I do have all that material ready and I will be doing briefings to candidates. It would be great to deliver that same training option to panel members if they wanted it, or if they wanted to know what we're sharing with candidates as well.
That would be very useful, Claire. Okay, members, we are looking to bring forward the April meeting because we'll be going into PERDA, so we will take that forward. But I think between each meeting, what I'd like to try and do is bring forward a training session on an item. Councillor Hendrick.
Yeah, I just wondered, one of the things that I'd be quite interested in, and I'm not sure it's a training item, but is to get an overview of what the touch points are between police and local council. Because I mean, there are several interactions with several departments, and I just sometimes don't understand how it all works.
So we have things like the community safety partnership as within most authorities is very much a controlling body. I sit on one of those. I'm probably sure there's other councillors and members who do that as well. There's
the MASH, for example. There's, I mean,
well, the community safety partnership is an executive meeting, so it's a very high level with engagement across all of the council services within, and I allude to my own council, and I know that goes on across others in Bedford and in Luton, that's actually chaired by the police, I believe. In Central Beds, it's chaired by one of my officers. But I think it may be worth getting an update and educate members on what that does, because below that executive meeting, there are other meetings that take place where all those touch points are discussed and used. So I think maybe a bit of an update around that to members would be quite useful. We can do a session on that if members are so minded.
I agree absolutely, Ian. I agree with you, Hilda. There are times when you think, who's responsible for this? Which side of the fence? And we need to have greater clarification.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, very brief. Look, the control strategy. I found it. I presume, Claire, that national intelligence model is still alive and kicking somewhere around policing. It used to be the process that drove activity. I think it might be helpful for panel members, Claire, unless you've got something else to say on it, that panel members understand a little bit about national intelligence models and how control strategies brought together.
Yeah, I did a couple of sessions for panel members a few months ago, but it didn't have great take up. There were a few on, but I'm always happy to re-deliver that, because I think there is something about, understanding. The expression was which side of the fence, but it is very much that. Is it OPCC? Is it police? What is the current control strategy looking like? A lot of that is going to come out at that PCC candidate briefing session, but it might be better that I deliver it purely for the panel, because we don't know when I'm going to run it for the candidates. If we get a delay in the election, that might roll into the summer while I'm covering the role. So we might need to bring that forward, Chair, if you want to.
So I think that would be quite useful, Clever, if you could build into that a piece of work with regards to how the police engage with different teams across different functions within local authorities. I know you.
Certainly.
Okay, and I actually have community safety panel on Thursday, the executive meeting for that. And I know from the attendance of that, we have children's services, we have public health, we have adult social care, we've got the probation services, and a whole multitude of different services within Central Beds and our different officer groups that engage with those panels. So, and I know that is replicated across the other two authorities. So it may be worth it as part of that, a briefing on all those different touch points and how they interact, and how, as councillors and as members of the panel, you can interact and raise issues with them as well. So I think that would be quite useful, and we'll bring that forward as a training exercise. Okay. All right. So members, thank you for that. And that, I believe, reaches the end of our agenda for this evening. So on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you for your time this evening. I would wish you a safe journey home, but I think you're already all at home. Okay, and we'll look to speak to you all again soon. So thank you.